Now, despite being the face of British farming, Jeremy Clarkson has pushed back against calls for him to become more involved in politics. The former Top Gear presenter helped organise the mass agricultural protest in London on Tuesday, calling for the government to rethink their inheritance tax changes. But Clarkson now says that he'd be a terrible political leader. Speaking to The Times, Clarkson said this: "I'm a journalist at heart. I prefer throwing rocks at people than having them thrown at me." Well, let's see what my panel make of this. Matthew Stadlen and Mike Parry are still with me in the studio. Mike, I'll start with you this time. Yeah. I mean, he's got a point there that you get it both barrels if you're a politician.
Yes. Look, Jeremy Clarkson's a great guy, in my view. I like successful people, like people who make, a huge contribution to the life of Britain, which he does. But there's a huge difference between being successful as a broadcaster and a businessman and being a politician. Unusually in this country, they're so divided. In America, Donald Trump can go around bringing any half-bake into government he wants, and already he's had to let at least one senior appointment go because they were so unsuited to the job. But in this country, I always used to say, people like Lord Sugar, people like Virgin boss Richard Branson, people like Dyson, successful businessmen should get into politics because they know how to run things, so can they run the country. But the other side is, in this country, the civil service. And you never get past the civil service. Now, I know what you do. So you've got to know how to operate in the political world before you can do anything. And Jeremy would be a hopeless politician.
But a lot of people are saying, hang on. Yeah. We need our Trump, right? We need a disruptor who's going to really shake things up.
I totally agree, but it can't work in the system in this country.
Yeah.
The reason why Brexit never got done was because of the blob. Do you see what I mean? Because they were determined. I mean, how many millions of civil servants are there in Whitehall who stop anything happening unless they want it to happen?
So let me give myself as a humble example, if I may. So I'm doing what Clarkson does, to an extent, throwing stones from the outside.
I thought you meant farming. I thought you were going to say you want to farm.
A bit more constructively, perhaps, than Clarkson. But I was heavily critical of the Conservatives. Now we've got a Labour government, and unlike Labour ministers, I don't have to sit here and defend everything that they advance, because I'm my own man. I'm answerable to nobody. I can say exactly what I want. It's much harder when you're in government, partly because you've actually got to make decisions, and also if you're part of government, if you're part of the cabinet, you basically have to defend the government line, even if privately you might disagree with it. Now, let's look at the challenges of actually being in power. We do have a disruptor, Nigel Farage. He's the biggest political disruptor of the last 20 years. You might make a case to say that he's as successful in some senses as Tony Blair in terms of his impact as a political figure, but he's never been in government. And that is a big shift, and I think he would be a disastrous Prime Minister. He's a brilliant campaigner, even if you thoroughly disagree with him like I do. Look at Jeremy Corbyn as one other quick example. He was a very effective campaigner. I couldn't vote to him to be Prime Minister.
People are crying out for that authenticity, right? Thomas has just written in, and Thomas says Clarkson would be a great politician. He says it the way it is, a man of the people.
That doesn't work in politics in this country. When you say it as it is, blankly and bang in the face, it doesn't work. Mrs Thatcher was so clever because she got into power and then spent 2 years, 2.5 years, analysing what needed to happen, but she didn't come in on day one and say, right, I'm going to cut taxes, right, I'm going to sell council houses. She did it by gradual degrees, and that's the only way you can do it. And people like Clarkson don't have the patience to go through the political system gradually. I think he's a great guy, but he would be a terrible politician.
I used to have to use the razor that my ex-girlfriend used to shave her legs. It scratched me, and it made me feel weird. But fear not, because Manscaped is back with a game changer. This isn't just any old shaver. We're talking about the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver with 2 interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. One for that baby smooth look, and another when you want to keep it a bit rugged. Get this, it's waterproof. You can use it in the shower, by the pool, or even while scuba diving if that's your thing. This beauty runs for 75 minutes on a single charge. That's enough time to shave your face, your mate's face, and still have juice left over for touch-ups. You'll also get their Power Shave Gel for a proper wet shave experience, and a face shave soother to keep your mug looking fresh and irritating consultation-free. It's like having a barber in your bathroom, minus the awkward small talk. Click the link in the description and use the code GBN for a whopping 20% off and free shipping with the code GBN at manscaped.com. Join the 11 million blokes worldwide who trust Manscaped. Your face will thank you, and so will your wallet.
Arguably, Mrs. Thatcher couldn't have done anything without the Falklands War, right?
Well, you may be right. That definitely gave her a huge lift because she proved to be a great leader, but she still would have got there in the end.
But Mike and I agree to some extent on this, although Mike's a bit of a fan of Clarkson and I'm certainly not. I should say, for the sake of balance, that he's obviously got a huge number of fans in this country. But it was interesting when he was interviewed by the BBC the other day, and he was asked whether he was angry effectively on behalf of the farmers. He said, well, I can't really be angry on behalf of other people. It was that he was terrified of tripping up over his own anti-woke agenda.
I don't think he did well against Victoria Derbyshire.
I don't think he did. I thought it was embarrassing because he was challenged with something he was said in the Times or Sunday Times in 2021.
That's right.
When, as I understand it, he said that the critical reason that he bought his farm was to avoid inheritance tax. Nothing illegal, by the way, about that. And now he said, "Oh well, that's not a fact." And then he went back over. He said he bought it because he wanted to shoot. And he said, but it came with the advantage.
But he then got into the farming community, and he's now become a champion for farmers because he lives within the farming community. So he's seen. I mean, look, farmers produce food, and again, the economically illiterate Labour government don't understand that if you stop food being grown, we'll have to import it.
We're not going to stop. It's not going to stop.
It will. If farms get sold, if farms get sold off, we won't be selling food. We'll be importing it. What happens if the storms hit Spain again and food in Spain doubles in price and we've got to import it?
Because they think, well, if I'm having to sell off 20% of the land, I might as well sell the whole thing because it's not financially viable.
Well, and then there's a conversation to be had about, if that happens, who buys that land?
Yes.
Is it going to be mega farms? I'm not a fan of mega farms.
Well, Bill Gates was in number 10.
No, let's not wangle Bill Gates. We'll be wangling in Marcus Rashford in a second. Look, as a journalist,
is he a farmer?
No, but he gets wangled in. He gets wangled into almost every conversation by the right. No, look, as a journalist,
Bill Gates does own farmland in the United States of America.
I think he's America's biggest landowner. I think Bill Gates is America's biggest landowner.
Yes.
And when you talk about farms in America and New Zealand, you're talking about 35 square miles of farms, okay? And that can produce food very cheaply because of the scale of which it's
my
produced.
critique of this particular policy in the budget would be that it may have unintended consequences. To my mind, I hope it was designed to go after massive landowners who own land.
There's very few of them.
Let me just make my point.
Let me make few of them
who buy up land in part to avoid inheritance tax, and that's completely fair. I think an unintended consequence may be that the threshold is too low, and that family farms may really suffer as a consequence of this. But we're not going to stop producing food.
Well, I think that's a very generous interpretation, because I'm of the view that actually maybe this will be a pretty good way for a government that wants to pave over the countryside with wind farms and solar panels.
Yeah, exactly, all over the place. I mean, so far in the show, Matt has really smashed Labour on the head 2 or 3 times. He's a very sensible man. All
right, we've got Grumpy Grandad says, I would sooner have Jeremy running the nation than Starmer. Jeremy can relate to normal people. That's what missing in politics today.
Yeah.
That's why Nigel is doing great. You heard of him, Nigel Farage?
Yeah, absolutely.
Once or twice.
Yeah.
All right.